Why did my golden child sister try to kidnap my child and move to another country, and my parents helped her cover it up? I pressed charges on all of them, and now my entire family says I'm the villain. So Reddit, I 32 female have always had a strained relationship with my sister, Ashley 29 female. She was the golden child growing up. My parents doted on her, spoiled her rotten, and excused every mistake she ever made. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one who had to figure out everything on my own. From as far back as I can remember, Ashley was the center of attention. She didn't just get the bigger slice of cake, she got the whole cake while I was told to settle for crumbs. If we argued over toys, my parents would tell me to be the bigger person and let her have her way. I remember one Christmas when I got a second-hand bike that my parents could afford, while Ashley got a brand new designer dollhouse and the matching dolls. When I expressed even the slightest disappointment, my parents scolded me for being ungrateful. Ashley quickly learned she could get away with anything, and she weaponized that knowledge. When she accidentally spilled juice all over my school project in middle school, my parents laughed it off as her being curious and offered to take her out for ice cream to cheer her up. Meanwhile, I was left to redo the entire project overnight. She'd often borrow my things without asking, whether it was clothes, makeup, or even my laptop, and when she inevitably damaged or lost them, my parents would just tell me to stop being so dramatic. Her entitlement didn't stop with me. Ashley treated everyone like they were beneath her. Growing up, she had a string of broken friendships because of her selfishness and manipulative behavior. She would borrow money from friends and forget to pay them back, lie to teachers to get extensions on assignments, and always made sure she got the best of everything in group settings. I remember once at a family wedding, Ashley threw a fit because she wasn't seated close enough to the bride and groom. My parents immediately intervened, rearranging the seating chart to accommodate her while ignoring how upset it made everyone else. As we got older, Ashley's entitlement only grew worse. She had a habit of using people for her own gain and then discarding them when they were no longer useful. She once moved in with a friend to save on rent but didn't pay a dime for 6 months because, in her words, they had extra money, and it's not like I asked them to offer. When the friend finally kicked her out, Ashley cried to my parents about how unfair it was, and of course, they blamed the friend for being too harsh. While I worked hard to put myself through college and build a career, Ashley seemed to float through life on charm and manipulation. She bounced from one half-baked dream to another fashion designer, influencer, travel blogger without ever putting in real effort. My parents funded every one of her failed ventures, often at the expense of helping me. When I asked for a small loan to help cover a deposit for my first apartment, my parents told me they couldn't afford it because they had just given Ashley money for a creative retreat in Bali. The worst part, Ashley never appreciated any of it. She acted like the world owed her everything and threw tantrums whenever things didn't go her way. If someone dared to call her out, she'd either play the victim or twist the story to make herself look innocent. My parents always took her side, enabling her behavior and making excuses for her. Over time, I realized I couldn't rely on my parents or expect Ashley to change. I learned to fend for myself, working multiple jobs to build the life I wanted. But even now, Ashley seems to think the world revolves around her, and my parents continue to enable her at every turn. Her entitlement hasn't just strained our relationship, it's made her dangerous, as I found out in the most terrifying way possible. After years of therapy and learning to set boundaries, I finally started standing up for myself, especially once I became a mom. My daughter, Emma for female, is the light of my life, and I promised myself I wouldn't let Ashley or my parents treat her like they treated me growing up. I wasn't going to let their toxic dynamic seep into the life I was building for my child. Of course, Ashley didn't take kindly to this newfound independence. She has always had this unspoken jealousy toward me, though she'd never admit it. Over the years, she's made countless passive-aggressive comments about how I got lucky with my career and life choices, conveniently ignoring the years of hard work I put into building a stable, happy life for myself and my daughter. When I got married and later had Emma, it seemed to magnify her resentment. Ashley went from being passively jealous to actively inserting herself into my life in ways that were deeply unsettling. When Emma was born, Ashley became obsessed with her in an almost possessive way. At first, I thought it was just normal excitement over becoming an aunt, but it quickly spiraled into something more toxic. She would show up uninvited to my house, claiming she just wanted to help, but her presence would often stress me out more than anything. She would snatch Emma out of my arms the moment she arrived, ignoring my protests. She started calling herself Emma's second mom, which I thought was a joke at first until she began introducing herself as such to other people. Ashley constantly overstepped boundaries. She would post pictures of Emma on her social media without my permission, often adding captions like, "spending the day with my favorite little girl." #MyWorld or anti-duties equals mom duties. When I asked her to stop, she accused me of being controlling and selfish, saying she was just showing off her love for Emma. My parents, of course, took her side, saying I was being too uptight and that I should appreciate how much Ashley loves Emma. But it didn't stop there. Whenever we were in public, Ashley would act like Emma was her child. She'd push the stroller, introduce herself as Emma's mom just for fun, and even chastised me in front of strangers as if I didn't know how to care for my own daughter. It was humiliating and infuriating. The comments she made were even worse. Ashley frequently claimed she would be a better mom than me because she was so much more fun and laid back, while I was too strict and overprotective. She even joked once about how Emma would probably prefer her if she had the chance to choose. It didn't feel like a joke. Setting boundaries with Ashley became a constant battle. Anytime I told her no, whether it was not letting her babysit, not allowing her to take Emma on outings without me, or even not letting her crash at my house unannounced, she'd throw a tantrum and run straight to my parents. They would then gang up on me, accusing me of being ungrateful and cutting Ashley out of Emma's life. They'd say things like, "She just loves her niece so much. Why can't you let her be involved?" This toxic dynamic wore me down over time, but I refused to give in. I was determined to protect Emma from the dysfunction I grew up with. I thought if I stood my ground, Ashley and my parents would eventually back off, but I was wrong. It all came to a head recently in the most horrifying way possible, and I'm still reeling from the fallout. Ashley and her husband, Mike, 31 male, have been talking about moving abroad for years. It's been their so-called dream to start a new life somewhere exotic, but nothing about it ever seemed grounded in reality. Over the years, they'd toss around ideas: Australia 1 month, Bali the next, then somewhere in Europe, all without any real plan or preparation. My parents, of course, treated their dream like it was a noble, once-in-a-lifetime goal instead of the delusional fantasy it really was. Despite their big talk, it was clear their finances weren't in any shape to make a move happen. Mike jumped from job to job, and Ashley's projects rarely turned into anything sustainable. Recently, they had been dropping hints to the family about how their dream was slipping further and further out of reach because of money problems. My parents, as expected, coddled them, reassuring Ashley that they'd figure something out. At a recent family gathering, Ashley dramatically lamented how unfair life was and made an offhand joke about how Emma would love it there too. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Ashley always had a flair for making ridiculous, attention-seeking comments. I thought she was just being her usual self, trying to spin the conversation back onto her and her so-called struggles. But looking back, that comment makes my stomach turn. It was a warning I didn't realize I should have heeded. One weekend last month, Ashley asked to babysit Emma. She'd been pushing for weeks, constantly pestering me about wanting more one-on-one time with her niece. Ashley had always acted weirdly possessive when it came to Emma. She seemed to view my daughter not as a family member, but as some kind of extension of herself, like a shiny new toy she could show off. I'd always been hesitant to let Ashley babysit, given her history of ignoring my boundaries and doing whatever she wanted. But that weekend, I had an important appointment I couldn't reschedule. Ashley jumped at the opportunity, insisting it would be good for me to trust her and for Emma to spend quality time with her favorite aunt. She played the victim card hard, whining about how I never gave her a chance and didn't appreciate her love for Emma. Against my better judgment, I reluctantly agreed. Ashley showed up that Saturday morning unusually cheerful, with Mike in tow. She was overly enthusiastic, gushing about all the fun she and Emma were going to have. It felt a little over the top, but I chalked it up to her usual dramatic personality. She promised to follow my rules, bring Emma home by a specific time, and keep her phone on so I could check in whenever I wanted. I gave her strict instructions: no leaving town, no unapproved trips, and absolutely no posting pictures on social media. She nodded along, acting like she understood, but there was something in her tone that didn't sit right with me. It felt rehearsed, like she was just telling me what I wanted to hear. I ignored my gut feeling, convincing myself I was being paranoid. After all, how bad could it really get? When I got home later that afternoon, Ashley and Emma weren't there. At first, I didn't panic. I thought maybe they had gone to the park or stopped for ice cream. I texted Ashley to ask where they were. No response. I called her phone straight to voicemail. Still, I told myself to stay calm. Maybe her phone died, or she lost track of time. But as the hours dragged on, my unease grew into full-blown panic. I called my parents to see if they'd heard from her. My mom brushed me off, saying, "Oh, you're probably overreacting. As usual, Ashley's responsible enough to handle it." "Just give her time," my dad chimed in, telling me I was being too uptight and needed to trust Ashley for once. Their dismissive attitudes set off alarm bells in my head. Something wasn't right. By now it was evening, and I hadn't heard a word from Ashley. I called the police to report my daughter missing. It was the most terrifying phone call I've ever made. The officer on the line took down all the details: Ashley's car, her description, and Emma's information. They assured me they would act quickly, but I couldn't stop pacing the house, terrified of what might be happening. Hours later, I got the call. Ashley and Mike had been intercepted at the airport. When the police found them, their car was loaded with suitcases, passports, and plane tickets. They were planning to board a flight that night, taking Emma with them. The officers told me Ashley and Mike had purchased the tickets weeks in advance, and it was clear this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. They had been planning this for a while. Ashley had even packed a small bag for Emma, filled with her favorite toys and clothes. When the police confronted Ashley, she had the audacity to play innocent. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, insisting that I'd given her permission to take Emma abroad. She told the officers she knows how much Emma loves me. She was fine with this. Mike stood by her, backing up every word like they were rehearsing a script. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Ashley had planned to kidnap my daughter and start her new life abroad, using Emma as a pawn in her twisted fantasy. What's worse, I later found out my parents had known about Ashley's plan all along. They hadn't just supported it, they'd actively helped her. My dad had driven Ashley to pick up her plane tickets, and my mom had reassured her that I'd come around eventually. They didn't see what was wrong with what she was doing. Looking back, all the little comments, the boundary pushing, and the weird possessiveness over Emma suddenly made sense. This wasn't just Ashley being entitled, this was calculated, and it could have changed my life forever. The police intercepted them at the airport just as they were about to board the flight. Emma was in Ashley's arms, clutching her favorite stuffed animal, confused but thankfully unharmed. When questioned, Ashley had the audacity to put on her sweetest, most innocent act, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. She insisted that I'd given her permission to take Emma abroad, spinning a web of lies so confidently it made my stomach churn. She knows how much Emma loves me, Ashley told the officers, tears welling in her eyes. I would never do anything to hurt her. My sister said it was fine, it's all a big mix-up. Mike backed her up, nodding along and repeating how much they adored Emma, like that somehow justified what they'd done. It was a blatant, calculated lie. When the police contacted me to confirm their story, my fury and fear boiled over. I told them everything, that I had never agreed to anything, that Ashley and Mike had taken Emma without my knowledge or consent, and that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was kidnapping, but what made it so much worse? My parents were in on it. In the days that followed, the truth began to unravel. My dad admitted he had driven Ashley to pick up her plane tickets, knowing full well what she was planning. My mom confessed she had reassured Ashley, saying, "Don't worry, she come around eventually. She's just overprotective." They didn't see it as a crime. They genuinely believed Ashley deserved a fresh start and that Emma would be better off with her. Hearing this broke something inside me. My own parents, the people who were supposed to have my back, had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. They had helped Ashley try to take my child, uproot her life, and disappear without a trace. When I told them I was pressing charges, the fallout was explosive. My parents called me sobbing, begging me to reconsider. "We didn't mean any harm," my mom cried. "We were just trying to help, Ashley. You're blowing this out of proportion." My dad chimed in with his usual dismissiveness, saying, "You don't have to ruin everyone's lives over this. Ashley didn't mean anything by it." Ashley, of course, made herself the victim. She sobbed to anyone who would listen, claiming I was ruining her life and that she just wanted to give Emma a better future. She told extended family that I was being cruel, vengeful, and heartless, painting herself as the misunderstood, loving aunt who had been unfairly vilified. Even extended family got involved, piling on the guilt. They called me cold-hearted, accusing me of tearing the family apart over what they insisted was just a mistake. But this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They tried to steal my child. Ashley and Mike had meticulously planned to take Emma out of the country, and my parents had actively helped them. I don't care if they think I'm the villain. I don't care if the family never speaks to me again. I refuse to budge. I will do whatever it takes to protect my daughter, even if it means standing alone. Ashley and Mike's move is, unsurprisingly, off the table for obvious reasons. The moment the police intervened, their entire plan unraveled, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. They're now tangled in legal battles, and their perfect little fantasy of starting fresh in another country has crumbled into nothing. The fallout has been catastrophic, not just for them, but for the entire family. My parents' involvement in the kidnapping has turned into a scandal that's ripped through our extended family like wildfire. Their reputation, once the picture of doting grandparents and supportive parents, is now in shambles. People are whispering, asking how they could have gone along with something so heinous. My dad, who always prided himself on being the family's rock, is now seen as a coward who chose Ashley's entitlement over basic decency. My mom, ever the enabler, plays the victim at every opportunity, telling anyone who will listen how heartbroken she is that I misunderstood their intentions. And yet, there are still family members who defend them. Some relatives have taken Ashley's side, insisting that I'd blown the whole thing out of proportion. "It wasn't like she was going to hurt Emma," one aunt said dismissively, as though Ashley uprooting my daughter's life and stealing her away from me was somehow excusable. Another cousin called me cold-hearted for pressing charges against my own parents, asking, "How could you do that to them? They didn't actually kidnap her, right? It didn't even happen." The gaslighting is constant, relentless, and infuriating. But the divide in the family is deeper than just a few whispered judgments. Some relatives have gone so far as to block me entirely, refusing to hear my side of the story. Others call me crying, begging me to make peace for the sake of family unity. They tell me I'm being too harsh, that I should forgive and move on because family is everything. The weight of their expectations is suffocating, but I refuse to give in. Ashley, meanwhile, is still trying to spin the narrative. She's posting vague, pity-seeking rants on social media about how her life was ruined by lies and how people will believe anything when they're blinded by anger. Her friends, what few she has left, comment things like, "Stay strong, girl," and "You'll get through this." It's sickening. She's playing the victim, pretending she's the one who's been wronged, while conveniently ignoring the fact that she tried to steal my child. My parents aren't any better. They've been trying to rally support among the family, telling everyone how unfair I'm being and how they only wanted to help Ashley get back on her feet. My mom left me a voicemail last week, sobbing about how I'm tearing the family apart and how I'm punishing them for loving their children equally. That word made my blood boil. They didn't love us equally. They didn't even love us fairly. And then there's Emma, my sweet, innocent daughter, who doesn't fully understand what happened but knows enough to ask questions. Why did Aunt Ashley take me to the airport? She asked me the other night, her big, curious eyes searching mine. I had to hold back tears as I told her that Aunt Ashley made a mistake and she wouldn't be babysitting anymore. Emma doesn't deserve this. She doesn't deserve the chaos, the tension, or the fractured family that's now our reality. I've cut contact with Ashley, my parents, and anyone else who tries to defend them. It's been a lonely, isolating road, but I know deep down that I'm doing the right thing. Every decision I've made has been for Emma, for her safety, for her future. Do I feel guilty? Of course. There are nights when the silence of it all feels overwhelming, when I wonder if I should have just let it go for the sake of peace. But then I think about what could have happened, what would have happened if the police hadn't stopped them. I think about Emma, stolen away from her home, her life, and her mother, all because Ashley thought she was entitled to a do-over. No, I will not let guilt sway me. I will not let their manipulations break me. They tried to take my child, and I will never, ever forgive them for that. Emma is safe now, and that's all that matters. The rest of them can think I'm the villain all they want. I'll gladly wear that title if it means my daughter is protected.